Welcome to SportsBeat KC, the Kansas City Star's daily sports podcast. It's Friday, December 11th, and I'm Blair Kerkhoff. College football games are being canceled all over the country, and basketball games are getting postponed because of the pandemic. But one campus town will be the center of attention this weekend, Columbia, Missouri. The Missouri Tigers are involved in a pair of high-profile contests, a football game against Georgia, 9th in the college football playoff rankings. That begins at 11 a.m. And then the Braggin Rights basketball game against 6th-ranked Illinois at 7 p.m. This game's on campus and not in St. Louis. It's been a terrific few weeks for the Tigers. The football team's coming off a dramatic victory over Arkansas to improve to 5-3. The basketball team is off to an impressive 4-0 start. On today's show, we talk about both teams with beat writer Souichi Terada and columnist Vahe Gregorian. So let's get started. All right, I got Souichi and Vahe here. And guys, I'm looking at this weekend's college football schedule, and I count 9 games that have been canceled or postponed. At this point, I don't know how you can postpone a game. It's got to be canceled. But included on this list, Michigan at Ohio State, Ole Miss at Texas A&M, Cincinnati at Tulsa, games between ranked teams, Oklahoma at West Virginia, Purdue at Indiana, and Texas at Kansas. That means the season is over for the Jayhawks, and they come in at 0-9.
Good for
matching the fewest losses in the season, 9 in I don't know, more than a decade. So that's good news.
Kansas. That is so impressive.
But one game that's not on the list as of yet, Georgia at Missouri, 11 a.m. kickoff Saturday. I am really looking forward to this game, as I know you guys are. Let me preface this by saying we're recording this on Thursday afternoon, so games have been canceled as late as Saturday morning during this college football season. Remember the Clemson at Florida State game, but we're gonna discuss this game as if it's going to be played, and I hope it is. But Souichi, you've been covering football now for a couple of seasons. This might be as big a game as you will have covered on the Missouri beat.
Yeah, Blair, it is a ranked matchup, believe it or not, with the College Football Playoff Committee ranking Mizzou at number 25 in the nation. I don't think anybody really expected that. It just kind of popped up on the timeline, and then slowly but surely there was, I think, an initial wave of maybe shock. And then everyone kind of embraced it. So I thought that was pretty cool on for Mizzou's part. But yeah, like you said, Blair, it's a big game. It'll be the first ranked Mizzou team I cover since the Vanderbilt lost on my first day. So that'll be kind of fun. But yeah, it's a very good Georgia Bulldogs squad. Obviously, maybe they didn't quite meet expectations because they did lose to Alabama and Florida, and they kind of had, maybe a little bit of a quarterback controversy throughout the season. But, they've kind of stabilized that, especially with Daniels, who is obviously the USC transfer. So they're looking pretty good there. Their defense is obviously still stout, still great. Eli Drinkwitz essentially called it a clone of the Alabama defense during his press conference this week. So you look at this and you feel kind of excited, I think, just because of just the many kind of the narratives, and then you look at Mizzou, who has won 3 straight, 5 of the last 6, and I know some people will point out that they aren't good opponents, but that's not necessarily Mizzou's fault. They can only play the teams that they play, and I think it's impressive just because Mizzou has shown that it can beat those bad teams that it's going to compete against in the SEC East going forward. So you feel good about it, and you get a shot against one of the top 2 teams in the SEC East, and you kind of just go from there, I think, and hope for a win, just like the LSU game when they were, nearly 2 touchdown underdogs.
Hey, before we go any further, let's acknowledge the entire day. It's not just the football game at 11, but Missouri, Illinois, Braggin Rights, 7 p.m. start, I believe it is, that night, and we know Illinois is they're their top 10, 6, I think. Anyway, it all adds up to a tremendous day for sports at Mizzou. And I was going down the list of the football games that we know are canceled or postponed, and those campus towns are, unhappy about not having action, in their towns this weekend. Columbia, it's got as much action as high level competition as any day I can remember. Vahe, what do you think? Listen. We can remember big days in Mizzou sports, football games when ESPN's Game Day was there for the OU game about a decade ago, and other big, the first SEC game. Remember when Georgia came in? But how about just with a football basketball combo? Pretty big day.
Pretty big day, and as far as I can tell, and I don't know if this is official, but certainly in our memory, first time Missouri will have played host in both football and men's basketball to a top 10 team on the same day. Now, there's a lot of reasons why that would be a hard combination to have just because of the timing of the seasons usually. So I think it's pretty cool, and it is interesting. I mean, Columbia will be semi-hopping, right? But it won't be what it could be if we were not in the COVID times. But it creates kind of an interesting backdrop for it all. And one thing, just real quick add on something you guys were talking about regarding quality of opponents and such. I was speaking with a friend today, and he brought up kind of an interesting point. Opening with Alabama is maybe not the ideal thing for a guy starting his career at a school with his, installing his first team and all that. But I think in an interesting way, it does give you a little truth serum from the get-go about, what you are, where you stand, where you have to go. And you certainly can't say that they haven't maximized the rest of the season since then. And we'll see how they finish, right? But I'm really looking forward to this game. I think it'll end up being an intriguing game. I could be wrong, but I really like the arc of where they're headed. I like how they play. I like what they've got. So we'll just see if they can make that into something special.
I think I saw Missouri's a 13-point underdog. Is it 12 or 13? Something like that. Double digits, I believe. So expectations are, not on Missouri's side in this game. But I think that's a good point, Vahe, that right out of the gate, and of course Missouri folks were not happy with the new SEC schedule that had them playing Alabama out of the gate. Alabama was, it was, look, you're playing the preseason, I think at the time, number 2 team, and that was an add-on to the schedule. But Missouri was respectable that night. And, of course, they had probably their worst game of the season the next week against Tennessee. But since then, as Souichi said, 5 out of 6, and playing really good football. 2 of those 5 wins, of course, just in dramatic fashion against LSU, the goal line stand, and then last weekend against Arkansas. I wanted to focus on those 2 games just as a point to say, in both cases, I was on social media, and a lot of folks who are Missouri fans or very familiar with Missouri were in the, oh no, here we go again, or, I'm closing my eyes and I can't bear to watch this. And in both cases, it broke right for Missouri. And I don't know if that's, we can talk about all the things that have gone wrong for Missouri football. Souichi wasn't around for any of them, to be honest with you. But Vahe, you and I have been, and it just, I don't know, for a program that's had so much misfortune in sports, famous misfortune. It's kind of neat to see Missouri win a couple of games the way they've won them this year.
Well, I'll address the Souichi curse at another time when he comes in, inherits a 501 squad to cover. But just briefly, Blair, you're right. We do know that whole history and what your muscle memory kind of does to you. And the Missouri fan would acknowledge being a tortured fan for a lot of reasons. And so we've had these 2 examples this year in pretty, not exactly similar, but pretty dramatic fashion that reminds you that it doesn't have to be that way, and that, it's a new era. Every game is its own game and things like that. And the last thing I'll say on this at this point is something that I found kind of interesting in hindsight. I was pretty sure they were cooked when what was it, 40-26 in the fourth quarter? Yeah, it was 40-26. I just didn't see much life in them. But when they fell behind, when it was 48-47 after that bizarre play, I can say this is true. I looked at the scoreboard. I thought 43 seconds, 3 timeouts. I see that happen all the time now here in Kansas City. And I like Connor's demeanor. And I figured they had a perfectly fine chance to kick a field goal there at the end. So part of that's maybe the Mahomes effect, but part of it's also from watching I still can't say it right, Bazelak. But part of it's just from watching him and thinking that, you can make things stand still around you if you have poise. So anyway, that's my little bit on that.
I realize a lot of fans have been kind of pointing to the end zone in which things, I guess, kind of happen. Especially for the LSU game. I know the north end zone is a little cursed, so the south came through. And then I guess Arkansas scored that 2-point conversion in the south end zone, but it ended up working out. But yes, I have had a few fans point that out to me, which I think is a little funny.
Yeah, I mean, and we know what they are, right? The flea kicker game and others, but I would add to that the Kentucky game a few years ago, wouldn't you, Vahe?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
Pass interference, the phantom pass interference, offensive pass interference. Anyway, it's just it's just neat to see breaks go Missouri's way, and they created the breaks in both games. Nick Bolton had the great defensive effort in the LSU game, and then Bazelak was just money driving Missouri down the field. It ended up being a chip shot field goal. Basically, it wasn't even you thought just get him a chance to get the field goal unit on the field, and it was a chip shot. So hats off, and look, I think Eli Drinkwitz is the SEC Coach of the Year. And he keeps bringing up the preseason over under. The expectation on his team was 2 or 2.5 or 3 or something. It wasn't that way with me. I thought Missouri had the opportunity to be a 5-5 team, but he has used the disrespect, chip on the shoulder, what have you, and has used it well, I guess. And I thought it was an interesting news conference, Souichi, he had earlier this week when. My interpretation of what he said was, look, this football program is holding up its end of the bargain. Now, fan base, boosters, everybody else climb on board, do what do your part, and let's see this thing soar.
Yeah, that's a great point, Blair, and I think that's kind of what I took away from it. And I really think the biggest thing maybe is that Eli Drinkwitz finally has some actual tangible results to kind of, back up a little bit. And I wrote about this too a little bit after the LSU game, in the sense that in the lead up and the whole lead up to the 2020 season, whether that be the pandemic or racial reckoning in this country or, delays, cancellations, postponements, anything you want to throw Eli's way, he did a very good job, getting the team's trust, during a pandemic and doing it over Zoom and all of these hardships. But at the end of the day, he didn't quite have that, the real tangible results, but now he does. When you're 5-3 and you're expected to win, like you said, 2 or 3 games by the odds makers, and you go out and win 5 games or probably 6, maybe 7, you look at that as a booster or a fan and you feel great about it. And the biggest thing too that's kind of struck me is the fact that 1, this isn't his roster, and he's still doing it. But 2, it's the fact that it's been a depleted roster. He said he only has 59 scholarship players. He's not addressing the 80 or however I believe the 80 player limit, I guess, for SEC football games. So you got all of these factors going against him, and he's still getting the job done. And I think part of that was, I think he was a little bit fortunate in the sense that he had a guy like Connor Bazelak, be kind of a player who can step in and contribute immediately like that as a redshirt freshman. But at the end of the day, he's doing well in the recruiting trail. He's only going to get more of his guys, and eventually next year, finally for him, he won't have NCAA sanctions going against him, docking him 4 scholarships in recruiting week. So you've got all of these things that point to positive momentum, and as a fan or a booster, it probably does make you want to buy season tickets or go to the games or contribute, your money to new projects like the indoor football facility. So I think Drinkwitz is very strategically kind of called for that, and I think fans should kind of want to buy in at this point.
One thing I'd add just to the sort of the coach of the year case, you said it in as many words, Souichi, but it's of all the years that it's worth noting, this is a first-year coach. I think that's a factor in any case you're making for coach of the year when you are installing an entirely new program and, there's this pesky pandemic and you can't quite do it the way you would have. I think all that implies that you had to overcome to just properly put in a system, but also to have the engagement and buy-in from your players despite all that. It's a pretty compelling case.
Yeah, not only a first-year coach, but a first-year coach from a different program, different classification. It wasn't like an assistant coach being elevated and knew the lay of the land. That just was not the case with when Eli Drinkwitz came from Appalachian State. So a couple things that I've noticed about Missouri, and Souichi, please dissuade me of this if I'm wrong, but the offensive line play has just been terrific. Terrific may be too strong a word, but much better than it was last season. And of course, he made the right decision, as it turns out, with the quarterback. With Sean Robinson at the beginning of the year, and after a game, a game and a half, he made the switch to Bazelak. And both, the improved play of the offensive line and the switch to Bazelak, I think were very key components to what we're seeing from Missouri this year, and not surprising, coming from a coach whose expertise is on the offensive side of the ball.
Yeah, Blair, the offensive line play, I think, is perhaps arguably the biggest thing that has kind of led to the success, and I really think it does come down to the trenches. And really, you looked at this offensive line, and it struggled hardcore last year. I was talking about this with a few people, and it was just they struggled so much last year on the offensive line, and they kind of let go of three players who ended up being pretty decent. Yasir Duran is obviously with the Chiefs now; he's gotten some playing time. Tristan Colon Castillo, he's with the Ravens, and he started, albeit though that was during a COVID-19 outbreak on Baltimore. And Trevor Wallace-Sims was, I believe, on the practice squad, or at least got a shot with the NFL with the Jaguars. And you lose those three, they didn't look good, and you kind of wonder what's going on here. And then after all of that, Mizzou looks pretty stout up front, and you got guys like Larry Borum and Case Cook and Michael Maietti. They're very experienced. They've had snaps, but then the other spots are maybe a little bit. Left tackle has been kind of not as much of a sure thing. But you look at this line and you're kind of surprised just because you lose so many people, and then it somehow gets better. And I think that's kind of set the tone a little bit. And I think with first year coaching staffs, it's really one of those things where you can't really see how good of a job they're doing just because there's not enough time, especially at a position like offensive line, because that takes at least a few seasons in terms of development and seeing what you can do with the guys you have, especially with the guys you don't necessarily have right now because of recruiting and roster and all that things we mentioned. But I think there's a reason why Marcus Johnson is a nominee for top assistant coach. And you're kind of seeing that, and it's really laid down the foundation for Mizzou, I think. And I think they really needed that in a year when you're only playing an SEC schedule for sure.
Okay, so we'll have offensive-minded Eli Drinkwitz against defensive-minded Kirby Smart on Saturday in Columbia. Really looking forward to this game. Okay, guys, let's take a break. And when we come back, let's switch the topic to basketball. Hey, it's Blair. We have a special subscription offer for SportsBeat KC listeners, unlimited digital access to the Kansas City Star's award-winning sports coverage. Sign up now for 1 year of Sports Pass for access to all the sports news, features, and columns presented on the kansascity.com site, and it's only $30. That's a 40% savings off our regular rate. Your subscription will automatically renew after the initial term at $50 unless you tell us to cancel. Your subscription helps support the sports coverage of kansascity.com and the Kansas City Star, and that support has never been more important. Please visit kansascity.com/SportsBeatKC offer to get this special offer And as always, thanks for listening. We are back with Souichi Terada, who covers Mizzou for the Kansas City Star, and columnist Vahe Gregorian. Guys, the football game against Georgia is only half of the big sports calendar for Missouri on Saturday. That evening, Illinois and Missouri play in Columbia. Souichi, remind us how this game ended up in Columbia.
Yeah, it was I have all the respect for Andy Katz. He stretched somehow a coin flip show into 30 minutes. I think that is an absolutely legendary performance. Hats off to him. But Mizzou won a coin flip. It was kind of funny when on the video you could kind of see the Illinois eye on the bottom as Andy kind of did the little flip thing. But yeah, it's a great game. I think it's kind of a shame that it fell on a very packed football Saturday. So the game is actually on SEC Network Alternate, which I know football Mizzou on the football side had kind of been relegated 2-3 times this year. So it is that's maybe a little bit of an unfortunate part. Another part, obviously, is that there will be no fans just because of the neutrality, and it's not an Empire Center and all these things, and the teams agreed to that. So it'll be missing, it'll be missing certain factors, especially during the pandemic. But I still think we're in for a very competitive and good ball game, and I think pretty much any Mizzou fan, obviously it's easy to say this, but pretty much any Mizzou fan would take 4-0 going into Braggin Rights against the top 6, I guess number 6 Illinois, for Braggin Rights.
For sure. Look, Brad Underwood in Illinois coming off a walloping of Duke at Cameron Indoor Stadium earlier this week. It's they are playing tremendous basketball, but so is Missouri, and I've been so impressed with what I've seen from Conzo Martin's team this year, just up and down the roster. I mean, we can take any player who's in the playing rotation and basically say something really good about him, because it's just been that way. I don't have let's see if I've got this right. The victories over Oral Roberts, Oregon, Wichita State on the road, and then most recently Liberty. There have been not different stars every game, but there's been consistency for sure from some players, but everybody seems to be contributing to this team and the success of this team. So what has stood out to you, Souichi, about the way the Tigers are playing?
Yeah, and the number one thing I think that you can't ignore is just the pace of play, and you're seeing it a lot more. Because I remember I watched every game of Mizzou basketball last year. There were times when that offense just could not get anything going. They were slow. They were deliberate. They were turning the ball over. They couldn't hit 3-pointers. That led to some very ugly games, especially because Mizzou is still, they're still going to defend the ball at a very high level, to the level Conzo Martin wants it. So, but this year, they've really put an emphasis on that. And even during the Liberty game, I think the first 15 minutes or so, when the Flames were kind of looking for that upset bid and built an 11-point lead, I was kind of struck by this one stretch where Drew Smith blocked a 3. Then that gave Mizzou an opportunity to run. And then the next thing you know, it's a 4-point game. Mizzou comes to take the lead, and they win for good. So it's even when Liberty was kind of schematically playing it, so they weren't going to let Mizzou run, they still found an opportunity to do so. And that's when things kind of fell apart, I think, for Liberty a little bit. So you look at that, and you look at a guy like Mark Smith. I was so impressed with him on Wednesday night, just because he started 0 for 4 from 3. He finished 4 for 8. He missed 4 straight, and he made 4 straight, and he's been playing lights out this year. And Drew Smith, who I mentioned, I think is still Mizzou's number one most important player, just because of what he does. And both those guys have scored double figures in all 4 games. I don't think that really happened last year at all. You see the gaudy point per game totals, and you kind of wonder, like, what happened compared to last year. And it's all those things I mentioned. So, and then obviously I'll probably have an article run up either Friday or Saturday, but Mizzou's defense is still the DNA, kind of the soul of their team. So you mixed all of that into getting a 4-0 start, and a very real shot, I think, of getting ranked regardless of what happens at Braggin Rights.
Hey, Blair, I would just add one little thing that I have sort of followed with interest. Souichi, I hope I'm remembering correctly that Conzo was talking about Mitchell Smith when he said he's like a credit card. You wouldn't want to leave home without him. And the reason I bring that up is I remember Mitchell Smith coming in the Kim Anderson era, and he was about, I'm making this number up, but it's probably an okay estimate. He was about 60 pounds lighter and it didn't look to me like he was going to be a factor. And I just think of him in terms of the context of development of players. And I'm not sure there's anybody in the program right now that you would say represents that more than Mitchell.
Yeah, it was just kind of the same thing I think with Reed Nico last year, especially when Tillman went down. But Vahe, it's funny that you mentioned a guy like Mitchell Smith, because then you kind of forget about other guys like Drew Buggs, the graduate transfer, and kind of just heap praise on him last night for his efforts, even though he hasn't scored. He's had 0 points through 4 games, but he had 5 assists Wednesday night, and him and guys like Xavier Pinson, Javon Pickett, we haven't even spoken about Tillman, and he's been playing great on the rebound, especially rebounding the ball. And like Blair said, it's crazy how much depth this team has, and pretty much you can pick anybody on this roster in the rotation and be like, this guy has done well, he's played his role. And I think there's a lot of buy-in from a very experienced team, which is why you feel good, I think, just not necessarily just because of experience, but you can see the buy-in, you can see that they're battle tested, you can see that they had to weather injuries in past years, and that doesn't hurt. Constance mentioned this a few times. That doesn't hurt when, teams kind of know or can adjust on the fly to an injury just because of past seasons. And, that's kind of maybe an unfortunate thing, but I think it'll give Mizzou an edge if the pandemic ends up affecting this team down the line, which it probably will.
Tell you what, Pinson sure can fill up a stat line, can't he?
Yeah. Just in watching them, he's the guy my eye goes to the most, I think, in a lot of ways.
I think he's the most exciting player just because you never know what's going to happen when he kind of barrels into the paint on a fast break. More times, I will say more good things happen than bad, but sometimes it gets a little chaotic, which is but it's fun to watch for sure.
I'm glad you mentioned Tillman a little while ago. I don't think we've ever had a conversation about Missouri basketball without mentioning Jeremiah Tillman. He's just a guy you pull for, and he seems to have made the progress that was needed of him. When I look at his numbers, I go to the rebounds first, but then I go to the fouls second, and if he's, it's invariably 4 or 5 in his career, but it's not that way this year with him. He seems to be, playing, largely outside of foul trouble, and he can be a darn effective player.
Yeah.
What is it about him that's allowed that? I have found myself really curious about that too. And do you think it's kind of fixed?
I don't know.
What sense?
I don't know if it's fixed, just because he did deal with very subtle foul trouble against Wichita State. I think he picked up his third foul, 7 seconds into the second half or something. It kind of made him sit. So there was that one game, but you can kind of tell the maturity with Jeremiah is just so different this year. And obviously, I don't know how much of our readership knows, but, he has a kid, I believe, around 4 years old or getting somewhere around there. Don't quote me on that, but, there's definitely this maturity, and he's kind of alluded to it when we talk to him in the sense that, it's his senior year. He's got to be more mature. He's got to be more of a leader. He's been through some stuff that kind of changed perspective. And, when a player says that, sometimes, it sounds good, but you're never sure until you see it. And I think this year with Jeremiah, you can see it. You can see kind of a renewed mindset. You can see, I think, a little bit more comfort in his role, just because, he's really put an emphasis on how many rebounds he's going to get this year, because, I think he'll admit this too. He wasn't a great rebounding center last year. The numbers didn't show it. And this year is completely changed, and so I think you look at this and you look at Jeremiah and you look at that he's he's no longer an 18-year-old kid, he's a 22-year-old man. And I think that is one of Mizzou's greatest strengths, when you can have a leader like Jeremiah who is putting in the work behind the scenes by all indications. And once again, you feel real good about this basketball team, especially compared to a couple weeks ago.
Okay, let's wind it down by allowing me to ask you the question: who has a better opportunity to win on Saturday, Missouri football or Missouri men's basketball? Vahe, we'll start with you. Better opportunity to emerge victorious. They'll be underdogs in both. We know that they're underdogs in football. I don't think we've seen a line for basketball yet, but Illinois will come in favored.
This is a tough one. I'm going to go with basketball. But I am not saying I don't think that game could come down to the end with Georgia. But I just think that the pieces are more in place for basketball to have a better chance.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll see. And by the way, just a quick aside with that, I saw recently on Twitter, our friend Dave Matter at the Post-Dispatch, it's a different audience there, right? When you poll a Missouri fan about Missouri, Illinois, that's a different kind of thing than it would be over here. And
Right.
I think his poll results showed that if you could have the team win one game that day, which would it be? The school win one game. Would it be football or men's basketball? And it was 70.
Don't say. Let's guess. I haven't seen that.
Okay.
I would say football. What do you think, Souichi? Or you probably know.
I saw the poll, so I won't guess. But yeah,
okay.
I believe it was football, right, Vahe?
It was 70%. We're pulling for football, which I think is interesting given how we, the Missouri Illinois thing is built into Christmas this time of year every year over there. It's a big thing.
All right, Souichi, better chance of emerging victorious, basketball or football?
Yeah, I do think I lean a little bit more basketball, and I think part of the reason, as Vahe mentioned, is depth and experience, but just the fact that these players have played at Braggin Rights the past few years, and they've won the last two. And it's funny because I'll pull up Twitter or I'll pull up Reddit college basketball, and I'll see Illinois fans say something like, "I can't wait for Braggin Rights when Javon Pickett has another career game," which for whatever reason he does every year. It's funny like that, and I just think not to say Mizzou Georgia doesn't mean anything. Obviously it does. Ranked matchup, all those things, but when it is going up against maybe your home state, and you have so many players who are from Illinois, you got the Pickett. You got the Jeremiah Tillman. You got a guy like Mark Smith, who obviously played at Illinois his freshman year, and you have. And I know I'm missing a few players, but when it's a little bit more personal, I think that gives Mizzou a little bit of an edge, and they've played like it the past few years. And I know the seniors on this team, the many seniors are going to want to go out with one more Braggin Rights win to close out their season if they so choose to leave after this year.
Okay. Well, I'll be the contrarian here and say football. And I'll say football because I think that Georgia will come in, even though JT Daniels is playing great, the offense has been better since he's been the quarterback. Georgia's not playing for anything except for standing. And they're not playing for an SEC East. They're not playing to go to the championship game. So I wonder about the powerful SEC schools' motivations in games played this late in the season. So we see it in bowl games sometimes when SEC powers, teams lose the conference championship game or didn't get into the college football playoff, are relegated to a bowl game that there's nothing in it for them except for the game itself. And we see a Utah beat Alabama or a Texas beat Georgia or something like that. And I wonder if there'll not be that kind of sense this Saturday. It would be huge for Missouri to win this game on the gridiron. And for Georgia, they're coming into Columbia and playing a hungry team, a confident team, a team that's in a really good frame of mind. So I'll say football. And that's not to suggest Missouri basketball can't win that night either, but I'm going to go with football. So, okay, for Souichi Terada and Vahe Gregorian, I'm Blair Kerkhoff. Thanks a lot for tuning in, and thank you guys for participating.
Thanks, Blair.
All right.
That'll do it for today and this week on SportsBeat KC. Thanks to our production staff of Derek Donovan, Beth Welsh, Randy Mason, Jeff Rosen, Chris Fickett, and Savannah Smith. A tip of the cap to Souichi Terada and Vahe Gregorian for stopping by and talking about Mizzou. Links to their stories can be found in the show notes and on kansascity.com. Hey, we got another good deal for you, especially for those that want to deep dive into the Stars' terrific Chiefs coverage. For a limited time, you can subscribe to Sports Pass for 99 cents a month. That's right, 99 pennies a month. After 3 months, it auto-renews at $5.99 a month unless you cancel. How do you get it? You go to kansascity.com/sportspass2020. That's kansascity.com/sportspass2020. You want more than just sports coverage? I know I do. Check out the entire Kansas City Star product. Sports news, features, commentary, and analysis, the whole thing. You get all the stories written by my talented colleagues, plus additional news, sports, and business coverage with the e-edition. The details for all of these deals can be found at account.kansascity.com/subscribe. And if you're having any trouble hunting down any of these offers, send me an email at bkerkhoff@kcstar.com and I'll get you to the right place. So whether it's the Sports Pass or the full subscription, you're getting and supporting the best sports and news coverage in Kansas City and helping us produce programs like SportsBeat KC. Thanks for listening, and we'll be back on Monday with a breakdown of the Chiefs-Dolphins game.